for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Thanks for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. You know what the topic is tonight, the hot topic in the news. After Ferguson, where do we go? What do we do? How do we get along as a community? How do we start the dialogue? One of the hardest things for a black lawyer or a black person to do is to talk candidly with their white friends about this issue, or even Hispanic friends about this issue, because we're so afraid now with so much negative, mean-spirited TV shows that you're race baiting. I mean, I don't even know what that means, but we have to start the dialogue. So we've had a lot of community meetings, but we actually have to get to the table, talk, and respect each other's differences. Isn't that what America is all about? Differences, but we respect each other's differences, the right to free speech, the right to free assembly, the right to gather and not be a police state, because that's what we're becoming. We're locking everybody up for if we don't like them. Now remember, we were supposed to incarcerate people that we were afraid of, not people that we're mad at. And now it's become, I find jurors so often will acquit if they like you and can relate to you, and convict if they don't like you, or if they're mad at you, or for having a bad attitude, even if they don't necessarily think they committed the crime. And we have got to somehow get back to the basics of what our Constitution was designed for, and not let the talking heads in negative social media and TV control our thoughts. Because remember, the Rush Limbaughs and the Oprah Winfreys of the world make $40 million a year. We don't. And they're controlling the minds of people who make very little money and making us all hate each other. And they probably have friends on the other side of the aisle politically and otherwise. So that's my rant. And now let me introduce my four guests. I have in the studio with me Steve Jackson, who is a well-known lawyer in Conroe. He practices all types of law, criminal, personal injury, family law, you name it, he does it. His office is right across the street from the courthouse in Montgomery County. And I have with me Teana Watson, a very good lawyer and good friend of mine from Fort Bend County. She's a former prosecutor. She practices all types of law too, mainly criminal, but she does a little bit of everything else too. And then I have with me our youngest lawyer of the panel, Ali Hassanali. And he's also primarily a Fort Bend County lawyer. He works with Teana Watson. And then I have with me Danny Sneed, Jr., the encourager. He is going to be our common sense. He is a reoccurring person on the shows. He's done a total of 15 years in prison. He works with the homeless, people being incarcerated, the reentry, and he works with the veterans, because he's a veteran. And so we will talk, hopefully, and encourage you to phone in and give us your comments. So, tell me, I'm going to ask everybody on the panel, beginning with Ali, why do you believe that the Ferguson officer was not indicted?
Putting me on the spot first.
Oh, unless you don't
no,
go first.
I don't know. I think it comes down to a number of things, and I think that the process that happened with that officer's indictment was irregular from what I think would happen with a normal person. I think you look at the facts that the DA dropped a whole ton of evidence. The DA allowed the officer to speak in his defense for an extended period of time, and I think that the grand jury itself may not, the standard for a grand jury to not have indicted him was really about 25%. I think they needed maybe 4 votes out of the 12 for it to not have gone through. I think we can point to a whole bunch of procedural inequalities that help when you have a bias against an authority figure, or for an authority figure in this case, that it makes it really easy for the benefit of the doubt to be given what is in essence a secret process.
Okay. Steve, let me entertain your thoughts on that.
I think the grand jury system worked great. This is not a black-white issue, in my opinion, when it gets to the grand jury. You had a district attorney who arguably maybe should not have even presented the case. However, when he did, I would give anything, after 22 years of doing what I do in criminal defense work, to have all the facts presented to a grand jury, to not hold anything back, which DAs typically do. They typically only put forth what's good for them. And the old saying that I heard this even on CNN, they can indict a ham sandwich if they want to. And you and I have seen it over and over.
Yes.
Here, they got everything. Defendants are always given an opportunity to testify if they so choose. We make requests like that every day, and the DAs welcome our clients into the grand jury with open arms because we can't be in there to defend them. Darren Wilson went in there by himself, without legal counsel, sitting in that room, answered every question without taking the fifth to protect himself from self-incrimination. They got to hear from every witness. And when all that is ferreted out, and you have witnesses who change their story from the beginning to getting into the grand jury, you have people's testimony that was consistent with the physical evidence, along with Darren Wilson's statements. There is no way, Vivian, if you and I were representing Darren Wilson at a trial, could they ever convict that man, much less get past, I think, a probable cause hearing. I think the grand jury system worked beautifully, and I wish it worked that way in more cases that you and I represent people on.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your opinion. And Teana, tell me what your opinion is.
Well, I'm glad Steve and I agree on one thing, and that case was not what is typically done in a grand jury case. He's absolutely right. And that's the problem. This case was treated differently, and quite frankly, the grand jury did what the prosecutor wanted them to do. And quite frankly, that's what's done most of the time. So the grand jury didn't indict because the prosecution didn't want them to indict. Now, we will never know that because it's a secret process and we can't get the transcript.
Oh, it's public.
It is.
Well, the transcripts are public. You're absolutely right.
They have publicized it in this case. Generally, the transcripts are
exactly
secret, but they have put them out this time.
And I contend that the DA was not seeking an indictment in this case, and the grand jury did what the grand jury normally does as a tool of the prosecution. And you're right, Steve, I agree with you that in most cases, we say a lot of times, the grand jury will indict a ham sandwich.
Absolutely.
And that's because the DAs want them to indict almost anything, and they do it. That's exactly my point.
So it's our exaggeration that whatever the DA says, blindly, the grand jurors will follow it, basically. It doesn't matter what it is.
That's exactly right. And I agree with Steve on the point that, yes, the data dump that they're saying, the fact that they had so much information, they raised the standard, which was not probable cause, which we know is a reason to believe, which most people would give about a 15 or 20% proof.
Give it less than that.
Or less than that, to beyond a reasonable doubt conviction standard.
Oh, wow.
And
why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because it was presented as a trial case and not a grand jury case for probable cause. And I think that in this case, and we agree on this, it was not typical, and as a result, he was treated differently from our clients, and as a result, obviously, Officer Darren Wilson got a different result than what our clients normally get.
Because certainly our clients might get a 60-second presentation before the grand jury.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe 3 minutes,
yes,
1 to 3 minutes, and the DA will just summarize, he did this, everything bad, and they indict.
Yes, ma'am.
And the true term is true bill. In this case, if it took 3 months, right, or 6 months, or a year. I mean, it took months to do this. And what do you think about the fact? Let me get Danny's opinion before I go to another question. Danny, what's your thoughts?
Well,
the question is, what do you think he should have been indicted?
Well, I don't have the legal expertise in how the system.
Just from a
layman's term, because of the response that did actually happen, I felt that maybe they would take him through the same process they took George Zimmerman, to maybe to kind of like to prevent what ended up happening. But
so you were thinking and hoping that they would indict him and let a jury find him not guilty, if that would be the end result.
right, so everyone could not react in a way of saying, "See, I told you so. We knew this was going to happen." But the legal minds knew, and 80% of the people knew that they were going to not indict him long before. But I think they delayed it because of what eventually happened.
Well, let's talk about this. You've been indicted 3 times.
Maybe more.
Maybe more. And they didn't take 3 months to decide whether you were going to be indicted. The facts were read real quickly. You weren't there. You didn't know about it, but you were indicted that day.
Well, this issue was bigger than the issue.
Yeah, that was bigger than you. So I guess from a legal standpoint, some legal scholars or lawyers are frustrated with that process because we rarely know when. In Harris County, since it's so big, we have to almost chase down prosecutors on when it's going to be indicted. And they're busy, they're overworked. I'm not criticizing them from that standpoint, but it's very difficult to gauge and monitor, you know, like when to present a grand jury packet, what's actually going to happen. So it was unusual. I've read some of the transcript. I've been on a lot of talk shows and local radio shows about this. And one lawyer that I was on was actually reading the transcript. And the way the DA started with Darren, Steve, was, you know how you say our clients go in without a lawyer. The DA sounded like his lawyer. When they asked him questions, the questions were, how many years have you been an officer? I mean, it was like 30 minutes of great answers, all a celebration about him, the awards he'd won.
Oh, I don't disagree. I think you can definitely spin it in a grand jury.
Right, but I'm just saying, you know how you said he went in there without a lawyer like our clients do, but the difference is the DA, if I send Danny in, they're not going to start asking him all the good things that he did first and questioning him if he goes in. The DA is going to go in there and first present all the bad things he did, and then when he walks in and tries to tell his story, they're going to cross-examine him and not do a direct exam, basically.
I don't know. I think you and I've also seen this as, I think we've had our clients go in where the DA does not want to do the dirty work. They don't want what we call blood on their hands because it's going to affect them politically in the community to not indict somebody.
Right.
So what they'll say is, listen, we're going to present this to the grand jury. We're going to tell you, listen, we don't really take a position here. Do what you think's right.
Right.
And we know what's going on in there. They're spinning it towards our client to get a no bill.
Right.
Or the complaining witness is not going to know what happened.
Right.
No one's going to see the transcripts because it's illegal to disseminate them or talk about what happened in there without a court order. So this does happen, and happens.
But don't you think it's interesting that they disseminated those transcripts when they, and I'm sure their laws are similar to ours, where it's secret, and they just publicized it.
I think what he did, I think what the DA did was arguably illegal. When I heard him on TV discussing the testimony prior to a court order, I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's absolutely committing a crime. And the fact that he's not going to be brought up.
And that's what's amazing to people from a legal standpoint. It seems like they're just doing whatever the hell they want to do, basically.
Exactly.
And so that's what's scary. And I think that's what's scary to the minority population, knowing they're the majority and they're doing whatever they want to do on the street that we don't know about because we're not on the street. And then to come from a legal standpoint, just scholarly, we see that they're just doing what the hell they want to do because grand jury testimony is a secretive. So no one even asked for it. It's like the day they gave the decision, they released the transcript.
Well, I think it was just...
Okay, what are you going to say, Ali?
Well, I was just going to say that I think the scariest part about it is instead of looking at it from the DA's perspective or looking at it from Darren Wilson's perspective, I think the community in Ferguson is looking at it from Michael Brown's mother's perspective, okay? And we know if you go into the courtroom, the DA typically is the state's lawyer, but in many ways they're the victim's lawyer, right? They're the victim's lawyer. They're supposed to be arguing on the victim's behalf and seeing I mean, and
you're right, you're bringing a good point.
That's what there should be.
That's what they didn't do. They usually are in there sympathetic to the deceased and their family.
And so when you have a DA who is in the process and they are the ones advocating on behalf of the officer, that's the criminal defense attorney's job. I mean, that should not be the DA's job. The DA is not supposed to be advocating on behalf of the police force or the state. if anything, they're supposed to be advocating on behalf of the victim.
You make an excellent point,
And
because when they're deceased people, in any case, they never advocate for the killer.
I mean, what I put on my Facebook post when I saw this was, I mean, in law school, it's a joke about how low of a standard probable cause is. I mean, in fact, one of my friends, he posted, the layman just doesn't understand how low of a standard is. Probable cause in an ordinary context is a cop comes up to you and, I smell marijuana. I never smoked, officer. I smell marijuana. I can search your car now.
Right.
That is a very practical, happens every day probable cause. And you're telling me with a body with 6 bullets or more in it.
That laid in the street for 4 hours, that was a crime, not seeking help.
Well,
I mean, not
that,
rendering aid.
I'm just saying
and we have
that
to
alone should be probable cause.
An unarmed body.
Right.
And that is.
Why does anyone know why the baby's body laid in the street like that?
No.
It seems to me that the officers are trying to get their stories together.
Correct.
Why would you not call the ambulance? I just don't understand that. What do you think, Steve?
I think we're missing something that Ali hit on, that if an officer comes up and smells marijuana, there's probable cause to search a vehicle, and you're going to get arrested, and you should. That's not a little probable cause. That's basically beyond a reasonable doubt.
But it's irrefutable if the officer's lying. That's the problem.
Oh, and it does happen.
That's what he means by that, because a lot of times there's the evidence that we see in court, there's no marijuana.
I don't
There's
disagree.
no burnt marijuana.
I think officers lie. I think there's good, bad, and indifferent officers in our world. At the same time, I think what this shows you is, you say probable cause is very low. I don't disagree. I think that what should tell people who understand what probable cause is, that's how bad the evidence was for that grand jury to look at, and that's why they had to come up with a no bill. And listen, I think the DA's job is not to represent a victim. That's incorrect. The DA's job is to do justice. And if that DA realizes this person should not be indicted, I was voted by the population to do justice. And justice is not to indict this man. He has an obligation to go in there and present it the right way for the right thing to happen, and to show all the facts and to bring all these witnesses in. And when that grand jury said probable cause is that low and we won't indict, I thought of Teana. Do you think you would lose that trial if you represented Darren Wilson?
No.
Well, I think that's precisely the point. The DA's job is to seek justice. And in this case, you have, like what Ali said, a deceased person. And the issue is, should charges be filed? Once charges are filed, we know there's a lot that can go on through that process. It can go all the way to a trial. It can plea, it can get reduced, and quite frankly, it could get dismissed.
Sure.
But the standard of if a charge should be filed when there's a dead person without even a weapon. And I think that's so significant, because in most cases, the officers could at least say, well, I thought he had a gun. I saw something shiny, and it was a cell phone. He was mistaken.
If you hit a police officer, you are putting your life in jeopardy.
I understand that. I'm a former prosecutor as well.
And I've known you as a prosecutor. But as a defense attorney, if you represented Darren Wilson on a murder charge, I don't think you'd lose. I think you'd get a not guilty.
I think probably with all the evidence and the way it was investigated and what I'm hearing about the case, you're probably right with the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt.
But the federal investigation mirrors the state investigation.
With the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt.
Okay, let's see if we have a call. Do we have a caller holding on?
Yes, you do.
Caller, thanks for calling in to Truth and Justice with Vivian King. What's your comment on this topic?
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
And the lawyer who was saying that that the other lawyer would have got a non guilty. Of course, I could have done that, especially in that particular jurisdiction, with those people that he was associated with because his father was associated with him. His father was killed by a black man. I mean,
whose father was? Darren Wilson?
Darren Wilson.
Oh, the prosecutor's
Prosecutor.
I think the prosecutor.
They tried to get him recused, but they couldn't.
Oh, the prosecutor's father was. Let me ask you this, caller. What can we do? You know, I've run for judge twice. What can we do? Why don't young people vote, though? What's embarrassing as a lawyer is that, you know, when something like that happens and young black people or old black people feel like they've been wronged, and then you look at the political structure and you see that that suburb might be 75% black or something.
75-25.
75 to 25, but yet all of the elected officials are white and they run unopposed. Why don't young black people who don't vote look at themselves in the mirror? Because I have worked hard to try to make everybody vote, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, everybody vote. But I don't understand. And, you know, what's frustrating as a lawyer, and I'm sure to Al Sharpton, is that you call me when something goes wrong, but when I'm begging you to vote, you won't do it. So I'm sure that those people, just like in Harris County, the people in Ferguson, don't know who their elected officials are.
Only 12% of the population voted in the last mayoral election in Ferguson.
Only 12% of the population, and you have to say that's mostly black people because it's mostly a black town. And so why do you think there's such a disconnect between voting and electing someone that you feel speaks for everybody, instead of being proactive instead of being reactive? Why do you think that?
Well, first you got to have somebody to vote for. So if you don't have anybody campaigning,
well, I ran. What about me?
Right.
Teana ran.
I ran.
And we spent all of our hard-earned money. See, the issue is not that. Are you seeking candidates who are running? Are you seeking candidates who are running? Listen to me.
That's here in Houston. But I'm talking about in Ferguson.
It mirrors it.
Houston,
it mirrors it. It's the same thing, and the same thing can happen in Houston.
But the percentage is different. It's not 74%.
Houston's probably only 25% black, but still, the percentage of voters is very low, and you could still have a lot more representation if people voted. That's all. I just throwing that question out, food for thought. What's your comment, caller? What else do you want to say about it?
This is all. Let me get off the phone. Also, I mean, the case has so many holes in it. They gave the officer several months to come up with this elaborate monster story that he was being attacked by this big black guy, and he just stopped him and told him get out the street. He just walked up to the police and tried to grab his gun, and he had to shoot him. And that right there is just like, of course, if he go in there and the grand jury hear that, and there's no one on the other side to question, are you serious? You were like a kid, and he was like Hulk Hogan, and he was dangling from your arm, and you just was so afraid, and you just had to shoot him. I mean, the whole case is ridiculous, and I'm gonna get off the phone, but hopefully Eric Holder and the Justice Department hurry up and do something to this guy. But the reason why it's gonna be fishy on that is because it got to be a civil rights violation, like it has something to do because it's race.
But it's still going to be that same community.
Guy, it'll be the same thing.
Right. It's going to still be the same community. But I appreciate you calling. I appreciate you watching. Let's take another call, please, and then hold that thought, Lily. I'll go to you next. Next caller, you still holding on, or did you quit us? Okay. All right, Ali.
Well, I feel like I can talk a little bit about your question about why aren't young people voting. Because I've been involved in a number of campaigns, including Tina's, and I can barely get my friends to vote. And
they're educated.
I mean, they're doctors. I mean, it comes down to a number of things. When was the last great spurt of young voters who came out and voted?
For hope, for
2008. But before that, when was the last issue that really mobilized young people?
You know, it's a different time because when we were young,
we voted. It was Vietnam.
Yeah, when we were young, we voted. Yeah.
Right, but my point is,
I think the age of MTV got a lot of the young people out. The MTV generation voted.
Well, I don't think any of the issues that currently are being discussed among talking heads has any everyday relevance to the average young voter. For instance, I think how we harp on social issues is completely useless because most of us don't care about that. I mean, if you want to talk to the average young voter, they're not really Republican or Democrat. What they are is they're probably more libertarian and want to make the government smaller and get privacy, and we want free internet. And that's the kind of stuff, net neutrality, that's never being discussed.
Y'all really want what the Constitution used to have, but why don't y'all actually do it? Because you're trying to make money?
Well, yeah.
Why don't y'all become politicians?
Let me give you what a career path is now for an average student. High school is super competitive. Okay, you're doing extracurriculars from 9 to 10 p.m. and you're trying to get into a good college. Great, you get into a college, now you're in a college environment for 4 years, you're busting your butt off to try and get a job. So you're doing interviews, you're doing this, you're doing more extracurricular activities. You have no time to pay attention to the real world. That's why you don't see any protests happening on college campuses.
Right now, because they're studying for finals. And
Right.
the kids who would be protesting now in Houston, I mean, I have a law clerk, they're studying for finals right now.
Right.
Let's take one more call. Caller, are you there now?
Hello?
Hello? Thank you for calling in.
No problem. I've been enjoying your talk. I was wondering if the panel had any opinion as to whether appointing a special prosecutor in this case would have helped at all, and or why that wasn't done here.
Let me start with Teana.
Well, I think that at least from the public's perception, it would have removed the distrust and the taint that they had about the process. Already, as we spoke about, the grand jury process is secret in how they meet and who they are and what's happening and how it's conducted. And so I think from that perception, it would have made for a better outcome for the public in Ferguson. Again, the special prosecutor, if that prosecutor was actually advocating for an indictment, I think the grand jury would have indicted.
Right.
And so that's the difference.
Let me tell you this about special prosecutors, though, in my experience being a former prosecutor, is the prosecutor still appoints their friend to be the special prosecutor. So it's the same people. It's like rolling over and says, darling, husband, wife, will you do it? I mean, that's how incestuous the power is in every county and every community. They're not going to go to the civil rights lawyer to do it. They're not going to go to a lawyer that's not, even if it's a defense lawyer now, it's going to be a defense lawyer that used to be a prosecutor for a very long time, and they're very good friends, and they're going to still run it. So that's the problem. That's why you hear a lot of groups ask for civilian review boards, where you can have representatives from the whole community be a part of that board, so you can really get decisions made outside of just this little circle of incestuous friends. Because one of the things the voters have to understand is prosecutors do not have bosses. The boss is the electorate.
The buck stops with them.
Yeah, the buck stops with you. So if you don't research your DA and know who you're voting for, you're just apathetic about it, you're stuck, and they can do whatever the hell they want, whether it's legal or not, because they are the law. And that's the part that's scary. There's no check and balance for that.
Well, Vivian, something else, in regard to his question, there is no need for a special prosecutor here.
Right.
To get a special prosecutor, you're going to have to show some type of bias that affects this man. Although he's had personal issues in his life where maybe his father was killed or some family member was killed.
That's pretty strong, though.
It is, but what you're saying is he could never prosecute a black-on-white killing in his town. And that's not why he was elected. He was elected
And I agree with you on that, but this is the only reason why, because this was a national issue, that's the only reason why we think so. I agree with you in terms of locally, he couldn't recuse himself from every murder. That is black on white or white on black. He could not recuse himself. But like Teana said, I think that he didn't have to, but I think it would have had a better look if he would have voluntarily done it.
I think, but if it had been true build, we wouldn't be talking about that. I think the fact that because he was no build, everyone wants to go back and find a reason why that happened when maybe this truly was justice.
Okay. Caller, do you have another comment?
I guess just to follow up, because you're talking that the prosecutor is only beholden to the electorate, would there be a benefit then to appointing a prosecutor?
If one was truly independently appointed, and that's just not my experience. I don't live there, but when I live here, the people, even when Pat Lycos was DA here and she appointed, if a special prosecutor was appointed, it was someone that was a long-term prosecutor. For example, Steve and I just tried a big case in Montgomery County, Conroe, and the prosecutor we dealt with, Kelly Blackburn, who was a DA in Harris County for 15 years. He's now a prosecutor in Montgomery County. He works for the elected official, Brett Ligon, who was also a Harris County prosecutor. Kelly, who was a prosecutor in Montgomery, I see him in Harris County all the time because he's a special prosecutor on a case here. So he was a prosecutor for 15 years here, basically transferred to Montgomery County, and because there's a hot button issue here in Harris County, like a police shooting, it's a police shooting, the DA can say, I appointed a special prosecutor. But what you don't know if you read Kelly Blackburn's name is that he's been a prosecutor here for the last 15 years, and for 2 years he's been in Montgomery County. So all he's ever done has been a prosecutor. It sounds special, but it's the same. They're the same people. They knew everything. Our client had been in trouble here. They knew everything about that case in Montgomery County because they're all working together. They're all law enforcement. So that's the problem, and that's why the Civilian Review Board would be a better dynamic if we ever want some independence, because they won't be from all former prosecutors. They'll be from all walks of life. Thank you for calling.
Vivian, one of the things that was troublesome to me in the account of what happened is when he ran from the car 154 feet, he took off running. And they don't really explain at that moment when he got to 154 feet, what happened that made him stop and say, now I'm going to go back and kill this police officer and turn around and charge him.
I don't think there's ever anything that he ever came back, did he?
Well, he took off running. He ran for 154 feet.
And then he came back to the car?
There were witnesses that it went both ways. Some said he did, some said he didn't.
I thought he was at the car at the very beginning when they told him to move over to the side of the road and come to me. And then the altercation happened, and then the boy ran away and got shot. That's what I
saying
thought.
2 shots was fired in the car. Right. They wrestled over the gun. Mm-hmm. Blood is in the car. His blood is in the car. So evidently he got grazed or scratched in the car. So he know now this officer...
He's about to kill me.
He gonna kill me. So when he's running...
Yeah, he's running for his life.
The fear is making him run. When do fear stop and then you become, I'm not scared anymore, I don't have a gun, I'm injured, now I'm this Hulk Hogan, Superman, I'm gonna go get this officer.
Yeah, I don't think he went back.
And I'm gonna charge him, 18-year-old kid now.
Yeah, they're not
gonna guys, I think something we're forgetting, some of the best soldiers we've ever had have been an 18-year-old with a gun. These kids are fearless.
Right.
They
and that's good, but I don't think that's the same situation.
Well, I think so. 18-year-olds, young kids are invincible and bulletproof to them. We're forgetting the fact that what this young man did, sadly, was rob a convenience store.
Rob?
He stole and assaulted that gentleman. That fits the definition of robbery.
Well, why would that matter?
It does matter because, listen, when a police officer tells you to pull over and you stop, you have a duty to follow the law and stop. When you attack that officer and you hit him and you go for his gun, you basically, in my opinion, are in a position of forfeiting your life.
You're adding intent and facts where we don't know that. All right, let's go away from Michael Brown alone, okay? The question is this an isolated incident? Because if it's an isolated incident, then it can go either way. Who knows? The grand jury made a decision. Maybe it's justice, maybe it's not. Okay? But if this is not an isolated incident, if you have kids who are getting shot down in the street by authority figures across the country, not just in certain communities, and it's happening again and again, over and over, regardless of state, justice system, DA, then we have to figure out, are we looking, is the indictment, the no bill that's happened in Ferguson, is that really the problem, or is that just a symptom of a much greater systemic issue?
I think it's a symptom, but I think you have to go back to the fact, I don't care if it's white, black, Hispanic, Vietnamese, if they attack a police officer, when he reaches in the car to go for that officer's gun or to hit that officer, my mother was a Houston police officer, my brother's a Houston police officer. I expect them to come home at night. You put your life in danger when you do that.
See, I think, Steve, the biggest thing is that Black America has a different perception because we don't believe, because we know Teana has 2 sons. We know our kids, and we don't believe that our kids would put their hand in there and try to assault that officer. What we believe, and this is where the difference comes in, is what we believe. We believe that when that officer told those kids to step over, it's in the transcript, told them to come here, the boy came. Correct. And we think that something else happened. We don't think, see, that's where we think the officer's lying. And that's where we don't trust the system, because we think the boy was obeying a command to come to the car, and then something happened at that point, and that we're not clear on what happened. But what we do know is this: it was a $6.50 cigarillo. And we know that there has to be some cost-benefit analysis. What our children also know, because they live in a more integrated society than we do, is that white kids smart off to the cops a hell of a lot more than we do. We know that our my daughter knows that her 14-year-old friend at Lamar was driving, had drugs in the car, and he would get escorted home over and over again when you shouldn't have a license, you shouldn't have drugs in the car. And I'm telling Morgan, you're 14, you're black, you can't do what that little white guy is doing, okay, sweetheart? Understand this. They're not going to escort you home. They're going to send you to jail, and your mama ain't getting you out because I get paid to get people out of jail. So you need to make sure that you don't do what he does. So what you have to understand in the what you were raised with is different from what we're having to raise our children. We're having to let them know you might not realize you're black because or there's a difference because the educators are trying to be fair. But when it comes to the criminal justice system, they're going to knock you over the head, and they're not making an effort to be fair, and they're not going to drive you home. They're not going to tell you to leave. In fact, they might go further than you expect them to go. And you can't mouth out because a lot of little white kids will mouth off at the cops. And see, our black kids, we're telling them, you better say yes, sir, no, sir. You better be obedient because you're going to get your ass shot. And so that's what I'm just saying. But our black children, like Teana has 2 sons, they're coming home telling her stories that their friends are doing. And so we know that the cops have many opportunities to shoot them too, for being sassy, for getting too close, and they're not getting shot. And so that's where we know that it's always going to be looked at like the black guy is the bad guy, but see, that mother's pain has to do a lot with the disparity that she saw her son be treated with the white kids that are there too. So that's the part that we don't talk about very much.
And let me say this, Steve. If he had a gun, if he had his own gun, I would be 100% with you that he felt invincible. He felt like those soldiers, those 18-year-olds, because a gun is empowering. That's the issue in this case. And that's what the people of Ferguson understand, and that's where the distrust comes in. There was enough time after all of the investigation, after all the forensics, for Officer Wilson's testimony to basically match up with the blood in the car and with the forensic evidence.
But
Let me say this.
Officer Wilson gave a statement that night. His statement mirrored his grand jury testimony.
But let's talk about this though. Why did the media say right after it happened that the cop did not know that boy had robbed that store?
The police chief said it.
The police
chief said it.
The sheriff came out and said they'd listened to the 911 tapes. He did not know, so there was a separate incident. Then all of a sudden it mirrored, and that's another reason why there's distrust about that. Because why would the sheriff make that statement without investigating first? Because that's what he put out in the media.
Yeah, he gave a press conference saying that.
I think a more basic, if we're trying to understand this, Steve pointed out the fact, well, this kid probably felt invincible, and that's dangerous. And my counter to that is, man, you have a police officer with a gun and a taser, a bulletproof vest. How do we know he didn't feel invincible?
Oh, it happens.
And
sure it does.
In an increasingly militarized police force that's happening. I mean, Fort Bend County just got a helicopter, like a military-grade helicopter. Why do we need a helicopter?
You know, when you have children going into schools and shooting up schools, I want my police force militarized. I want them to be able to protect me. And the fact that they let Ferguson burn down and they did not do something about it, they were under-militarized in that point.
Well, I heard that they were there, but they protected certain communities. I heard that they did have the what did they have? The military
National Guard.
And they didn't put the National Guard where they expected them to be, where all the violence was going to be. They put them more in neighborhoods.
Those guys didn't do their job.
They didn't do their job. I guess the issue is, and this is where we have to get into it, we know as black Americans that if all of these from city to city, coast to coast, black cops were killing white kids with the exact same evidence, it would be a totally different outrage. We just do not believe that the white America will be saying, yeah, but he probably beat him up, and he probably did. That's where we distrust our white friends. And I love you to death, Steve, but that's where we distrust what you're saying, and we realize that you're looking at it from a tinted lens. If your son doesn't have a weapon and he shoplifted $6.50 or robbed a cigarillo, you would want that officer to use some judgment, and once the little boy's not cooperating, just let him go. You know where he lives. If he's walking to a store, he walks to that store all the time. That's his neighborhood. It's on video. They know who he is. They can put a no trespass warning. They can go talk to his parents. There are alternatives. There has to be a cost-benefit analysis. If he just killed somebody, get into an altercation. Call for backup. But to start trying to, because what we know is this, and this is where we differ. I understand white America's scared of black kids. Hell, I'm scared of them too.
I don't think
that. But I'm just saying, the thing is, all an officer has to use is those buzzwords. He was dangerous. He was big. See, black people look deeper than that. He didn't have a weapon. He wasn't that dangerous. We know that our sons are much scarier and they cry more than white America knows they do. Even though they try to talk tough in school, they try to talk tough on the street. We know that they're not tough. You're tough if you're packing a weapon. You're tough if you're packing a weapon. And if you're packing a weapon at that age, you're usually driving a car. Okay, you're not going to be walking down the street. And so we just want some discretion to be used, and not to say, even if over the radio he heard that he stole a cigarello that was $6.50, is that really worth getting into an altercation without backup with that kid? And you see he's 7 feet tall, so I mean, it could go bad.
Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm not African American, I'm not white. I grew up here. I have friends of both races. I am Muslim, and I know earlier before the cameras were rolling, we were talking about fear. And the way I look at this is the same type of fear what a kid my age who's black has to go through when dealing with law enforcement is probably that same level of fear that I get when I have to deal with when I walk into the airport. Okay, I know I have to be on the best behavior. I'm a single male with a funny last name, and I'm gonna walk into that. Okay, but that's one instance maybe in a month or a few times a year where I know in this scenario, I am perceived to be like this.
Right.
I can't act a fool, and I know that other people, not everyone, but there are definitely going to be people who are going to be looking at me and making those assumptions about me.
I think it's a good point.
And I think here's the issue. Look at the demographics of the law enforcement, look at the demographics of the judges, look at the demographics of the DAs. And if you have to ask those people, that group of individuals, do they have the same knee-jerk reactions to races in certain scenarios? And I think what Vivian and Teana are talking about is there is a fear that if you put a black kid next to a white kid, that the black kid is more dangerous than the white kid.
I think when you start generalizing and stereotypes, I don't disagree.
You don't think that fear exists?
I'm not disagreeing with you, but my point is this: hypothetically, let's take as true that Michael Brown reached into that car, was hitting at the officer, and tried to get his gun from the officer.
Okay.
If that's true, the officer had every right to do what he did.
Absolutely. But see, that's the issue. We don't think it's true.
And that is
we
the issue.
agree with you on that. See, that's where the black and white difference is. We absolutely agree with you on that. The distrust is that we think the officer is lying.
He embellished it. He had to.
We think
he didn't have
but I'm just telling you, that's where we disagree.
There's no proof of that.
What I'm saying is,
but there's no proof there isn't.
But you're going to always believe, and see, that white America is going to line up and believe him when we know that every officer is going to say what he has to say is that I was in fear for my life. I think officers have a dangerous job, and I think that they have to go home at night. And I don't think most officers that are good and experienced will put their life on the line and deal with that for a $6.50 cigarette. That's what I'm just trying to say. We think that officer was being a bully. That's what I mean. I think that that's what people are thinking because it wasn't enough to get angry about.
Let's say he was. Let's say he's being rude and disrespectful to that young man, and that young man does something in retaliation for it. I don't think we will ever really know what happened in that car.
I agree with that.
But if you take as true that young man reached in that car when that officer's pulling his gun, telling him to stop, and he reaches for that gun, at that point, that young man put his life in harm's way, sadly. But if that officer...
But Steve, they had to come up with some justification. We know that.
So if you were going to lie, what would you say?
Right, we're lawyers.
That's the issue we're going to say. If you were going to lie, what would you say, though?
Exactly. We're lawyers. He killed the young man. There's not an identity issue.
Absolutely.
The man is dead. So you have to come up with
something that
a killing took place,
Justified.
some justification. The justification he came up with that could fit the evidence is what you said. He couldn't say I thought he had a weapon because he didn't have a cell phone or anything shiny or a black wallet.
How did the officer know at the time that he doesn't?
Because there's no evidence that he had anything on him. Unlike many other cases where they say, well, I thought I saw something.
No.
So he had to have something to fit the facts to justify it.
My point is, if that young man was attacking that officer at that point in time does not know if that man's armed. You've prosecuted people who they weren't armed, but the officer could have absolutely believed it is possible that they are. I want that officer coming home at night. That young man sadly put himself in harm's way.
But why is it so? This is my question.
If he attacked him, Steve.
But why even? It's like me. I want to be on the right side of the issue. To me, it never was a race issue.
I agree with that.
Because my peers in the black community, I know how my peers and I know how we act. And that guy's 18. I'm thinking like, he only really lived 8 years of really understanding what was going on. From 1 to 10, he wasn't doing anything. So from maybe like from 10 to 18, he started acting out and started becoming bigger than an adult. But what I'm trying to understand is, when it happened, I could agree that Michael Brown was wrong. I never saw it just one way. But when I heard commentators like Hannity, you know, they have just this concrete thinking that I won't have an open mind to believe that their officer could be wrong in any case scenario. I'm not going to even give you one hypothetical. When I give my opinion, I'm sure, without a reasonable doubt, that guy was wrong. And based on the evidence of what happened in the store, he deserved it. He robbed him. And when you look at that, it's like shoplifting.
It is shoplifting.
I mean, he didn't.
It's aggravated, but it's shoplifting.
When you describe it legal in the legal terms,
it's robbery.
But look at the term. When you to make your argument, you use the term robbery. But he never would have got convicted of robbery. He'd have got convicted of lesser charge.
It would have probably been pled down to like a small, to a minor shoplifting.
When you make the argument, you should make it from what you know it really probably would have been convicted.
But the officer had the right to approach him and detain him.
I'm not
if he knew. So what you're saying is that you don't believe when the police chief first said that was true. You think the police chief lied then?
That I don't know.
Because the police chief, that resonated throughout all of America, that he investigated it and that he did not know about the boy shoplifting. But then all of a sudden
he gave a press conference saying
he did a press conference saying that. So that's another distrust issue.
Well, here's what bothers me personally, because the fact is my friends could get shot in the street. Okay, when I think about this, I'm not thinking about this. I'm thinking about if I'm walking down the street and I'm with some of my black friends. Okay, we get cop pulls over, someone starts saying something or we don't act a certain way, it's late at night, we're wearing hoodies, who knows? The thing is that if I'm associating with this ethnicity or this group, could put me in danger.
I think if you're a white young man, you reach your hand into a police car, I think you expect to be shot if you're attacking the officer.
Well,
this is not a black and white issue.
Let me get to the point.
But the issue is like after Ferguson. Let me go. So let's talk about that too.
Well, okay. After Ferguson.
No, I'm just saying what you're saying is after Ferguson.
So what
I still think that way.
What bothers me is when we have, like, there's this young man, he was shot in Bel Air, okay, in his own driveway, in his own neighborhood.
Robbie Tolan.
Yeah, Robbie Tolan. I heard him speak great. And he was talking about how he hung out with nothing but his white friends, okay? He was on the baseball team, good kid, whatever. It happened that night. The cop came up, started bothering him in his own driveway. He ends up shot. Thank God he's still alive. Okay, and that's.
But it hurt his baseball career, and his father was a pro baseball player.
And what I'm saying is, what's scary is this: the distrust is not. Could I, at any point, am I ever in fear that this could happen to me? And I think if you go to and you talk to somebody who is white and male, on the average person, they're never going to say, I think that could happen to me. If you talk to a black kid who's male and my age, and you ask, could this happen to me? They're going to give you a different answer. And because that fear exists, that means that we have something wrong. There is an institutional bias. And I think it comes from the fact that we don't have proper training for our police force, either on the federal level or and the local level. I think the people we bring in to educate about culture and diversity are probably some of the people who are least qualified to talk about it.
Let's do one thing. Let's take a call, and then I want to throw out one other question. Go ahead, caller, because this time is going fast like it always does. Caller, state your question or a comment, please.
I hope I've misunderstood you, but I think you all said that if a person put their hand in a car and reaches for a cop's gun, they deserve or should expect to die. I think that's outrageous.
I think what I said is this, that if a person attempts to take a police officer's gun from him, I think you put your life in jeopardy. A police officer's
Absolutely jeopardy, but a trained police officer should never think that it's okay to shoot 12 times to a running victim.
I think if that victim is running towards him, he's not a victim. He's a danger. I absolutely believe that. And I'm a criminal defense attorney. I represent people like
You
this.
frighten me, criminal defense attorney with the relatives who are police officers. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Wow.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. This is another
always
issue
love,
that
don't
was troublesome. That we need different points of view. Let me tell you something that was troublesome. I was told that for 2 months the grand jury thought that they had the wrong law. They had a law that says in Missouri you can shoot a fleeing suspect. They said that, and they said that there had been a law in Missouri and other states that said that, and the United States Supreme Court found that to be unconstitutional in 1985. And they said for the first 2 months of the grand juror's thinking process, the evidence was the boy was fleeing, and he got shot, and it was okay. It wasn't until 2 months into it that the DA corrected the law. So they had that embedded in their mind. Why would a DA ever give the bad law? If that's true, why would they ever give wrong law that's been over since 1985?
That's scary.
And so that part is a part of the transcript.
Sure.
And so that's another reason why that supports people's mistrust. We have another call. Caller, you want to join in this hotbed discussion?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes.
State your comment, please.
Yes, I'd like to say hi to everybody there. And
Speak a little bit louder for us.
I'd like to say hi to everybody, and I don't believe it's a race issue. I mean, it's about being right, doing the right thing, and being wrong, doing the wrong thing. Sometimes you get caught in the middle of it.
That's an interesting point. You do get caught in the middle of it. That's true.
I believe he was just in the right place. He's like, I've been in my own house, and somebody reported me robbing my own house. And that's what I love. Like, 5 cops came by, guns throwing. All I had to do, put my hands up. I didn't say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, sir, no. They find out that I live here. And they apologized and everything, and they left.
Right. Well, they have to. If someone thinks of somebody suspicious, they do have to respond. I agree that we have some delicate issues to discuss, and I want for us. We have 5 minutes, so we need to all wrap it up. Thank you for calling. We have some delicate issues that need to be discussed, and we need to be open and honest with each other about our fears and our thoughts, and but still figure out a way to protect our children. Like all of the panelists have said, and protect our police officers. The problem is, just like we want our police officers to go home safely every night, and I think they should do whatever they can to do that, we want our black teenage boys to come home too, and we don't want the ones that are good to be falsely accused and have to wear the brunt of the bad ones. And that's the problem. A lot of our kids have to share, they have to be responsible for all the bad boys, and it's difficult, but I just hope that what we would like to see is that where I'm wrong, I admit it. Where you're wrong, you admit it. An officer can say, I was scared for my life, but maybe this is not the job for me, like he did. You know, he did what he had to do, but this is not the job for him. Because I think that in the end, he acted irrationally. I believe that he probably shot the boy for because I had the car blood, and I think he should let the boy go. Maybe he charged him. Maybe that was the right thing to do, but it's just too many black kids getting shot by white cops, and that's where, that are unarmed, that's scary for us as mothers and fathers and cousins. I mean, it's scary for us. Ali, give us a minute. Everybody take a 60-second wrap-up, please.
I think what worries me most is that what we see is that there is bias wherever there is discretion. And where we know that at the level where there's the police officer and law enforcement, there's discretion, that there's bias there that we need to fight. Where there's prosecutors and their discretion in how they bring cases, there's bias there that we need to figure out how to stop. And where there's a jury and judges who may not necessarily understand culture and communities, there's a bias there that we need to address. And only one of those, really, or two of those, we can affect only by elections. Everything, there is actual institutional bias that exists outside of that can only be addressed by legislature. And we need to look
And as people get older, I mean, your culture, when y'all are in charge, will be different. things will change, hopefully. Steve.
You know, I think we need better training for officers. I think, sadly, we have very young men, anywhere from 21 years of age on up, coming in with high school diplomas and maybe some college coming into law enforcement, and they're given guns. They get about 6 months, maybe a year of training, and the problem is we put these kids on the street. Until you're 25 years of age, your brain hadn't even fully developed, as science tells us. We need better training, and I agree with Ali. Cultural diversity training needs to be part of their regiment of education, but these kids are given guns to protect our society, and they have to make split-second decisions, and a lot of times it's out of fear. And when fear and adrenaline start pumping, you can make a decision that you think's right to protect yourself, but it's absolutely legally wrong. I don't know if what happened in Ferguson was right. I think that there's so many different points of view we can take, and we're never going to really know the answer. I think where we go from here is education, training. The citizens of Ferguson need to vote. We all do. And that's how you make changes.
They need to go to jury duty, and don't think that we don't think the black kids should be stopping crime. We're working on that too, but we do want people to, we don't want unarmed kids to get killed. I mean, that's just the bottom line. Go ahead, Teana.
Well, I agree with what was said, and I agree in also the fact that our kids have to understand that the protests today are good in that you're getting involved, not the riots, but the protests and the voices, but you have to connect the dots to voting and to participating in the process that actually put the people you want in office, the people you trust in office, the people that you can relate to in office. And if you don't do that, then it's hard for anybody to respect you when you're complaining. In the last election, the last 2014 election, 12% of the population between the ages of 18 and 35 voted in the state of Texas, 12%. And when you do that, you don't have a voice, and people don't respect your voice. And so where we go from here is these dots have to get connected. This anger, this frustration, this tension has to get connected to what the minimum you can do as a citizen, and that's vote. And we have to keep repeating that.
Right. And one of the things that I found that kids don't vote behind are the reasons Ali stated earlier, but also kids are so idealistic. They really, whether they're black, poor, white, everybody believes the system is fair. And so they don't really think they need to vote to make it fair. People don't understand. They don't have that disconnection. They don't realize that when they see a judge, they just see fairness. They don't see a black judge or a black female. I mean, a white judge or you know, a Republican judge. The kids don't know. They just see fair. They think that that's justice. That's what they see. Lady judge. They see the scales, and they don't, because that's how little involved they are, because it's just far removed from reality.
Right.
Danny.
Okay. 13% of this country is black, and I have a 13-year-old grandson named Jaden, and a 3-year-old grandson named Jaden. And I have to carry the conversation to them. And with the hands up, don't shoot brand and message leading to protests and people disagreeing with it, I ask myself, is this a bad message for my grandson to see that when you encounter an officer, you may need to show your hands up. You may not need to say don't shoot, but you need to take a defensive stand. It's come to the point to the relationship between the black community and police officers. We fear them.
Yeah, we're scared of them.
And we believe they have power. Right. Like they just have power to terrorize and get away with it. Right. And whether that's a false fear or not, we still react to it. And I don't think we react in aggression 90%
and that's what white
of the
America
time.
doesn't know. They don't realize that we're actually scared of the police. And you made it very clear. You've been in prison 3 times, but you still, when the cops came, you surrendered. And we know when we look at police reports, most of the time, no matter how bad the gangster is, if he's a murderer, they surrender. See, black people really are scared of the police. And I guess that's the point that we need to make, is that I don't think the white America realizes we're scared of the police. Even if we've done wrong, we're scared of the police. And so we don't see a black kid as being the aggressor unless they're on dope or something. You know, like if they're on PCP and acting real erratic. But we see, because we know in our discussions privately, in our private homes, the baddest dude in the family is still scared of the police. My daddy was a bad dude. He saw the police. He was born in 1919 in Louisiana. He got scared. He shut up. I'd never seen him scared before unless we passed the police right down the street. Otherwise, he was a terrorist, a bully. But I'm just saying, black people, even Danny, who's been to prison, aren't you scared of the police?
Stop emphasizing that I've been
I've been in prison to visit.
I am a returning citizen
He is
now.
he is a re-entered society. How do you say it?
That's a good politically correct term. I like that.
Yeah, I'm a returning citizen.
He's a returning citizen that's making a difference.
Right.
And I think it's time to wrap up because that's what we're seeing. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. We've been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate